two things. Not only have I personally experienced it or lived through, and I believe really worked hard on the healing aspects of it. But that's one of those things you got to get to the root of, like, why is this my condition? And there's always these reverses surgery. And again, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor, so I don't know that I want to give advice to this person, but I can tell you what it took for me.
Hello and welcome. In this episode of the Life in Boxes podcast, we explore and unpack a box we call anxiety. There's a person I reference a fair amount in this podcast who is dealing with anxiety, and it's my amazing and powerful wife. Why I wanted to tackle and explore this box is because it was unfathomable to me that somebody with her genuine great skill set, work ethic, and generally pretty darn good life, personally, if I do say so myself, could be dealing with what she's been dealing with. Like all of our podcasts, as you listen and go forward, we share these stories so that those that are dealing with these things don't feel alone and have some freedom around talking about it. So enjoy this conversation with Jenni and I, and we welcome your comments and feedback. What are we unpacking today? Like, what's in the box?
What box in life do you suppose would be relevant to this whole conversation?
To this whole conversation?
Do you want to peek? Do you want to do the honors?
I will do the honors. Also, welcome to the Life in Boxes podcast.
Clearly, I'm wearing life uniform. I might just wear it every episode. I don't know. We don't know. Oh, you got lots of stuff.
There we go.
Oh.
Look at that.
You're going to just leave that in the box?
I'm just going to leave that.
Oh. Anxiety?
Anxiety. Let's talk about anxiety.
Well, this is where you're the expert. I've never dealt with it.
I love it.
What's it say?
Are we talking about the stigma of anxiety? Is that it? Are you ready to actually look at that, Jen? Look, this is a topic that is I'm dealing with head on right now, right? Like, this is not like me personally. Certainly can relate and have had times in my life where I've had anxiety.
Not you personally. Not the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's different, because what that is what is that? Being versus feeling.
Okay.
Right? So you can have anxiety about, say, driving down the road in traffic, and you've got anxiety because you're having a lot of stuff going on, but that's like your body telling you to be aware of what's going on in your surroundings, right? And I think the anxiety that we're going to talk about here is a lot more like, I have trouble functioning as a human with, even if there's nothing in my face causing that anxiety at the moment.
Yeah. And we also just learned, well, I think we've known, but for the sake of a quick stat, I'm still surprised, like, true condition of anxiety
disorders.
The persistence of operating in anxiety, whether it's post-traumatic stress or true, this is the way I was wired when I was born, a combination of things. But we just looked up that 40 million people in the U.S. alone, 19% of the U.S. population is diagnosed with anxiety.
That's people that are diagnosed with it. That doesn't even count the probably countless others that are.
Right. And to that extent, like, children ages 3 to 7 start experiencing these symptoms. So there's a lot to be said there. And I know we're going to unpack more of this.
We are going to unpack. Can I add just a little bit of something to that? Because I thought while we were doing this,
like, what is it?
What is it? Or
I think we're supposed to unpack that. What is anxiety, Gary?
Oh, what is anxiety?
What is anxiety?
Well, I'm not sure. Here's what it is, symptom-wise, right? Like, so anxiety disorders are a group of related conditions, each having unique symptoms. However, all anxiety disorders have one thing in common: persistent, excessive fear, or worry in situations that are not threatening.
Mm-hmm.
So, not threatening. People typically experience one or more of the following symptoms. Emotional symptoms look like feelings of apprehension or dread, feeling tense or jumpy, restlessness or
Inability to
irritability.
read.
Yes, and or irritability, anticipating the worst and being watchful for signs of danger.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, I can check a lot of those boxes in my household right now. It's crazy.
You can check them. Would you pack them?
Yeah. Physical symptoms: pounding or racing heart, shortness of breath, sweating, tremors, twitches, headaches, fatigue, insomnia, upset stomach, frequent urination, or diarrhea.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, yeah,
That sounds like a fun thing.
yeah.
Also, I could add to that in my own experience that yes, I'm actually happy to talk about. Because I also am happy to say that there is a completely other side in terms of healing that I didn't think was achievable when I was going through decades of experiencing it. I thought it was just I was just fucked up,
Yeah,
and medication was the only solution, right? Like
yeah.
I was misinformed. We'll put it that way. But
So,
before we go there, you touched on something about in that definition. You described the physical symptom, but what's missing from that too is that I want to underscore is the belief and the programming of your thoughts and
mm-hmm,
the fog that ensues when you are hyper focused on the sensations that you're feeling in your body, and also trying to escape them, right? And so it becomes difficult to think clearly as a result, right? And obviously very much over indexing on emotional reactivity, but it's very very real. And so to have someone in a moment try to tell you, oh, like these are the boxes you're checking based on the clinical definition, as someone who's been on the receiving end of that, is like, it's one thing to understand the definition, it's another to really acknowledge that what people are experiencing in that moment is real. It does not, like, I think I want to like pause there, but also say like it doesn't have to be real, and naming it doesn't make it bigger or smaller necessarily in the moment, but like the toolkit can grow over time, and there
mm-hmm.
is a path to getting to a place where you reprogram things.
Yeah. So, in what you're sharing here, you're not really experiencing anxiety now, but you have in the past. Yes.
Absolutely.
And what you're talking about
My
is
first
that you
husband could write a book about,
all,
like,
all of
like
that.
I said, there are multiple perspectives on these things, and most definitely some things we'll get into as we unpack this box.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Going reading those symptoms. There's somebody close to me now that I am like, wow, like that's their experience, because and I know that that's their experience because they've shared it.
Yeah.
Like that dread, the just like everything's awful, like there's nothing that's going to work right, like
And there's probably a
everything's
few
in
things
the things
not
that
to
they
say to
say.
that person in the moment, right?
Well, and it's also
Like
weird, but
snap
even
out of it.
but also, yeah. Well, even but that irritability is one of them too,
Yeah.
right? And I'm, thank goodness, I am not snapping back, or I'm not
Right.
doing something like it. I can see what's happening there, right? And I'm not saying the stupid thing, which I might have done 15, 20 years ago, but not doing now. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's, which is good, because I think that, like, I know the younger version of Gary. I thought, you're just not being tough enough.
Mm.
You're not, you
Like
can't have
mind over
anxiety.
matter.
Well, and this goes into that guy thing, right? Like, no, we are conditioned to not
Don't show.
don't show those weaknesses.
Yeah.
Don't show that that's going on. Don't have. So with that,
So there's a definition, right?
yep.
So we talk about it. You like feeling versus being is something that we wanted to capture here, and we'll try and catch each other in that, because whenever someone's in it, they're in it, and it's almost like a commitment to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you're feeling it, but you don't have to become the identity of an anxious person, and we'll unpack that. But we have more. We have another. If you can imagine, I think
More stuff.
yeah, there's
More stuff in the box.
Yeah, yeah. To help guide our
To
conversation.
help guide our conversation. Excellent.
Yeah.
What does this mean to you?
What does this anxiety mean to you?
What does anxiety mean to you? Well, and maybe more accurately, like, tell us about what your experience, what it felt like when it happening with you.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were.
And then, well, then you can flip, or I can take it on. Why don't I take it on?
Why don't you touched the question
I
first.
touched it, so it's mine. All
so
right.
here's an anxious dog to say
Yeah.
hello.
So I have had points in my life, for sure, where there was dread is that word that probably is the most the one that resonates the most with me, and like that it manifests itself like in my gut. Like it was, I went to
Hmm.
bed with it, I woke up with it, I experienced it throughout my day, like
Were
just
you
in.
physically ill, or you're just saying that's where you felt?
No, I just it wasn't, I wasn't physically ill, like I was throwing up, but it felt like I don't know that a knot is right. Like it felt
Heavy.
worse and heavy
Yeah.
and yeah, just constant. You know, and that was in a high stress job pressure situation, tons of hours, all of that, right? And it was amazing when I left that environment.
So it was
And
contributing to, it was
it
creating it.
that whole, you know, obviously my experience in that environment was, it's, you know, I was at the top, so all the pressure's on me, all the forces on me, everything's there, and it just and I
Just
could
went
just
this way.
feel that responsibility coming to it. So yeah, and what it was like to be out of that. So removing myself from that environment fixed it. Like
Hmm.
e-
You think so?
well, I didn't have it anymore. Like
You didn't feel it.
yeah, I didn't feel that pit in my stomach. I didn't have that dread. I wasn't waking up in that day out, day in, day out. So it was not a.
So would you call that anxiety, or would you call that, like, certainly I was going to say I don't want to mince words, but that's what I'm doing. So let's go there. Like, is that anxiety, or is that your gut telling you you you're not in a healthy environment? Like, to go into survival mode to be there.
I it's but it's not just the gut. It was the dread, right?
Yeah.
Like it was the and but it was just this it was something about the pressure of it and the
Yeah.
dread, but it was there that just dreaded like going into maybe
The reason I'm pushing on it.
maybe the relentlessness of it because there was no days off,
Yeah.
right? Mentally, physically, or anything, right?
Uh-huh.
Like just so maybe I
So
don't know.
burnout.
Yep.
But like, so you were experiencing that feeling, but you, like, what I'm hearing is that it was appropriate for the situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
and especially since it disappeared when I left it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus experiencing those feelings when you're going to your dream job, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the operative word in part of the definition was that it was experiencing these things in situations where there was no threat, or there was no
Yeah.
trigger that someone without a condition of anxiety might feel in any situation.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I now that I'm looking at the situation, while that was constant, the source of it was working with the owner in that situation, right? It was the owner, then me, then
Yeah.
everybody else, right? And great guy, totally loved him. Like honestly, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that.
No, I
Like
know.
we were,
In case you're
but
listening.
no, it's not even. It's like I doubt he ever would. But but really,
Sounds like a
but
challenge.
like really affinity there. He had affinity for me. I have affinity for him. Like there was nothing out of
Would you spoon him?
context there. What's that?
Would you spoon him?
I did buy him underwear once.
Oh, fun fact.
Fun fact. Ex officio was the best thing.
Yeah.
He was
All right.
complaining.
All
Anyway,
right, great.
the the but it was his pressure, right? It was whether he was actually applying it or not, because sometimes he could get pretty intense.
Like
That
camping.
yeah, that dread
Intense.
would be things. Yeah, yeah. Huh? Look at you, just bringing them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you felt it for sure. And I think, like, I think to honor people who need the assistance of medication to get to a place of navigating and healing. The reason I ask about those things is because I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things we're really dealing with, like right behind it, right?
Yeah.
And that it is a normal response to a toxic environment to feel that way, to go into it.
Yeah.
And not to, you didn't say it was toxic per se, but like,
Yeah.
you're talking about the pressure, and you're talking about things that are just not conducive to balance and health, and sleep deprivation, and the ability to recharge, and burnout.
Yeah.
Like, all those things are real.
Yeah.
Those are real.
Yeah.
So give yourself credit that what you experienced was your body telling you through these anxious symptoms that like something's out of whack.
Something's out of whack. Yeah, it is interesting because I don't because I like comparing that to what I'm dealing with somebody close to me right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
It's different.
Yeah,
because I don't know that removing the circumstance. Yeah, I think that there's and when I listen to them, they have multiple circumstances that are feeding this anxiety.
Or
So,
validating.
or validating,
Right?
or
I've been
doing
there.
whatever. Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to that person? I mean, like you've come to the other side of it. You've lived that, right? That experience.
Man, it's tough, right? Like, so two things. Not only have I personally experienced it or lived through and I believe really worked hard on the healing aspects of it. But that's one of those things you got to get to the root of, like, why is this my condition? And there's always nature versus nurture. And again, I'm not a doctor, you're not a doctor, so I don't know that I want to give advice to this person, but I can tell you what it took for me, as well as a mother of like my grown ass beautiful adult woman who used to be a child. Like really struggled with the onset of these symptoms preschool age. And there again, it was easy for me to recognize symptoms, but also it was true that life circumstances were very much, putting a magnifying glass on the triggers. And
Right.
so first things first, right? Like, for me, my anxious response, and in conjunction with my wiring, I had to go on a real, like, deep path to understanding who I was, aside from, and put aside the answers that I didn't want to hear. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had learned in my early 20s that at some point when my parents were going through a divorce, that my dad was clinically diagnosed narcissist.
Mm.
I had already gone through a lot, and we'll have a lot of boxes to unpack. This podcast is going to be on for years at this point, and I don't know where this accent just came from, but it happens. It happens. Anyone who knows me knows that when I get on a tangent, here comes, like, whatever.
Yeah.
We just got to give her a name. I don't know who she is. Anyway, that set in motion an identity crisis for me. Because not only at the time I didn't understand, first of all, no, it's not contagious. It's also not necessarily genetic, right? Like, just because you have someone, I remember taking a narcissist test that as soon as I learned, I was like, holy cow, how do I know it's not me too? Because no one, even if people had tried to tell me if I was a narcissist, I wouldn't be listening. Like, wow. So I went online, found a test for, like, how do you know if you're a narcissist? And the first question is, has somebody in your family or directly related to you recently been diagnosed with narcissism? And I'm like, yes, it knows me. And it's like, congratulations, you're not a narcissist. A narcissist would never wonder if they were a narcissist. So I was like, okay. So I could sort of, like, temper that down, but then I had to, like, I really went to school on some of those, like, daddy issues, right? Like, including one of the things I had to do was accept that this person, who I was in just a very unhealthy relationship with since I can remember, but the idea of the person to me also had to die. Like, the idea that
the idea of a dad,
of what a dad is. Yeah. Like, I couldn't have expectations anymore. And I had to really make peace and do a lot of grieving about the choice to discontinue a relationship with him. But that, coming back to the question, like, for a while, it flared my anxiety stuff. And like I said, like, my first husband had a lot of grace around it. However, there was some stuff that was really misguided because in his, I think, at times, desperation to create relief, not just for me, but the impact it would have on other people that were in my home with us, like our family and our friends and the people we were surrounded with, it makes everyone miserable, right? And so he needed me to feel relief so that he could feel relief, so that other people could feel, and because it would turn into controlling my environment. And I was trying to make sure what I was doing, instead of looking at my own triggers initially, was I was trying to educate people about my triggers and then ask them to not touch them.
So
what someone does naturally when you're like, here's a button, I need you to not touch it.
I'm pushing that, baby. Yeah.
Especially kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the people that you're closest to.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're the worst. We're the worst.
Well, it's so frustrating. Do you want to follow a recipe for how to keep a fragile person from falling apart? Like,
yeah.
Well, of course there's grace and compassion.
Let me ask you something.
Gary, it's your turn.
Were you present, like really present to the impact that your anxiety was having on the people around you at the time? Or did it take some time to, like...
I would have told you that I was, but in hindsight, what I see now is way, way, way more clear.
Yeah.
I definitely felt it. uh and I would we're not talking like, just to kind of paint the picture, it would turn into like the OCD things that, or like I wanted, if we were having a party or hosting a party, which we loved doing, or having friends out, on our boat, or at our cabin, like I wanted to create this impression that I had everything, all my shit together, right? And so I had a meltdown one time because our friends got to the boat before us, and I was worried that they would be putting groceries away and that they wouldn't know where they were supposed to go. And and again, like all these examples, like, and I literally hyperventilated over it. I was so to the point where my husband came to me and he handed me, and here again, it's like he meant well. In hindsight, it was the wrong thing, but I get it. Like how common all these things are true at the same time. He hands me a Xanax and he goes, "Please take this." And of course, my resistance went through the roof of like, if we just got out of the house on time, I wouldn't feel this way. And maybe there's truth to that. He wasn't wrong for an intervention in that moment.
Right, right.
I learned, unfortunately, Xanax was a terrible fucking strategy, because it just made it worse when I didn't take it. Hence, it's highly addictive, and whatnot. At the time, I was opposed to. I hadn't even smoked a joint in my life yet. God knows how that happened, but it did. Like, but also but so it started really to come apart at the seams in terms of just like perfectionism and all these things, and then really a fear that like I didn't know if I could fix me, because nobody was talking to me about how you work through that.
Right, right.
People were talking to me about how you minimize the symptoms.
What did you consider going to the doctor?
Oh, I had a therapist.
Okay.
I think I had two therapists at the
Okay.
time.
All right.
Like, and I also had really excellent, like, one thing I can say about my first husband and our relationship is we had incredible communication, like incredible. We knew our relationship was over when we started raising our voices at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he was there in the season I needed him as the human that he was at the time. And I hope he's well and happy wherever he's at now, right? Like we both, I think, wished each other the best when we parted ways. But he certainly got me through the shittiest of shit when it came to contending with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, where I was steered wrong, I was able to see that this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like in terms of like, it was time for me to really just get deeper into those questions, like, and realize like I wanted people to stop trying to convince me that it was a choice to stay in it.
Yeah.
Turns out people were right, but telling me that in the moment.
Is it a choice to stay in it?
For me, I was dealing with it because of trauma, right?
Okay.
It was and multiple traumas,
So
not just from one place, not just dad,
the
not
circumstance, the condition
just
that
everything.
that had it in there was around the trauma.
Yeah.
And so dealing with the trauma was going to help you
Yeah.
get past the anxiety.
Now, am I predisposed? Do I have this condition of anxiety? Yes, I do. I am very much, but I don't think that the way that it would get magnified and the spectrum of how severe it was had nothing to do with my predisposition and everything to do with the trauma that I hadn't dealt with.
Yeah.
Everything, right? Like, and really understanding we do have the ability to change our minds. We have the ability to reprogram our wiring. We can change our brains, and it takes a long time and ongoing work and commitment to believing that where you're at is, if it's not where you want to be, that sometimes that's what you have to, like, even just getting to a place, my daughter's incredible at this, like to the point where when she is in her feels and anxiousness, and in her, like, she's first of all learned to know, oh, that's what's happening. And my brain is going to lie to me about how bad a situation is, right? But also she will receive the prompt of, okay, I understand where you're at right now. Acknowledgement, right? I make sure she feels acknowledged. And then I can ask her what she wants to feel like when she's on the other side of it, and start naming those things. And it's not to get her to disregard her current situation, but it moves you closer to the idea that there is another side.
So the choice there, because you can feel very
trapped, right? When
Yeah.
you're in it, like there is no escape, there is no way out of
Yeah.
this anxiety. Everything's awful. There's dread, there's all of that there, right? If so, what you could or would say to somebody, right, that is experiencing that is that yes, you can retrain your brain, right? You can.
But don't tell them in the moment.
No, but the well, literally maybe the purpose of this, right? The
Maybe.
podcast is that you can hear it from somewhere that's
Yeah.
not somebody that's close to you, right? And so
Sure.
that makes a
Yeah.
difference. So I now again, we're not medical professionals, you know, and everybody's got different things going on and all of that, but the retraining your brain, the rewiring, the real things, the important thing about that for anybody to get, that if you're not going through it, if you've never experienced it, that it would be impossible to understand,
Yeah.
is it doesn't happen like that.
No.
It's not a choice. It's not a choice that just shows up as, hey, you don't have to be like that. Choose not to be, and
Right.
go ways. You are making that choice, but you have to make it a million times,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
and it's a practice
Yes.
that you're getting through every time it shows up.
Practice.
You know, I love it. It's acknowledging what's there, right? Just like you pointed to, and then being able to continue to, okay, it's there. Now I'm going to let it's going to do its thing, and maybe I can make some new choices, or I can give myself more positive affirmation, or I can get, whatever it
Also,
might be, right? Like, so,
yeah, and I think like making agreements when you're not standing in it.
Yep.
To make agreements out about what is the toolbox and what is the most helpful thing to chip away at progress and healing.
Yeah.
As like if this is your partner, if this is whatever, right? Like I think like to make the agreements before it, when you're not in it, it makes the in it moment feel easier because then you have your recipe, right? It's like I have a working agreement with my daughter that like it's okay. Not only does she is it okay for me to ask her that question, but it's but she was able to say only after I feel like you understand where I'm at. Like don't try to talk me out of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like don't
yeah.
try to make it better.
Don't try and do that. That's such a great, like, how great is it for your daughter? How great is it for the person that I know that's dealing with it a lot right now, right?
Yeah.
Is that's the agreement I put there as well. Is like, look, I'm a safe place.
Yeah.
For you can be as messy, as irritated, as fearful. You can be your most vulnerable self with me. Like, go. Like, you get to be that in that moment, and that's a real gift for them.
Yeah.
Right? They get and I know that because they tell me that.
Yeah.
Not because I'm asserting it. Right? Like there's an appreciation there. So like that is a great thing.
Well, then it feels like teamwork,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, it also feels like you're not doing it alone.
Well, you're not.
Yeah.
And I think like is that both like anyone in it and anyone supporting that person, it's not to be miserable. And that was part two of it. Is it's like, okay, so there's the toolkit for how I learned to navigate myself through it. Also, where those triggers were that I was trying to get everybody else to dance around, those were mine.
Yeah.
Those were mine to own, and it also gave me a really good like punch list of stuff that like I had to really name the boxes that I needed to still name and deal with. And like just because I had years of therapy didn't mean that I had done the healing, right? Like and I was being stubborn about it, like playing it. If you can imagine me being a stubborn person.
No.
I know.
What?
I know.
All right. What else do we got in this box?
Well, we have questions. We might have jumped again. Because we're fine. We're not perfect.
We're not perfect.
We're not going to have anxiety about it.
All right.
You've witnessed me in an incredibly anxious scenario.
Oh yeah.
Like,
but that's different though, right? Like, so what you're talking about is public speaking.
Yeah.
Pitching.
Uh-huh.
Your product, your baby,
yeah.
your thing, right?
Hot seat.
But that is a normal human behavior that has evolved, and that's supposed to be there, right? We're supposed to have those things that have us on high alert and have us in those moments. We will have that. That is a normal anxiety moment.
Well, I appreciate you giving me a hall pass, but here's the thing.
my point is that wasn't a condition that just you woke up in the morning with it and you went to bed at night with it. You know what I mean? Like,
True.
yeah.
Well, I did wake up with it and go to bed every day leading up to the fucking pitch. But here's what I had to learn about myself as a result. It wasn't the public speaking part that triggered that. It was owning my story and saying it out loud
Mm-hmm.
while also having the confidence to back my own product for the first time as a founder. And there are a lot of layers to those things, but the one I struggled with the most was the judgment of my story, not the judgment of my poise or my public speaking
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah,
even
yeah.
like it was to say my story in the way that I did and know that like now it's out there.
Yeah.
Now it's out there. It's difficult to create intimacy and trust in a conversation and share things about your life in a room full of hundreds of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to let go of the idea that I was going to need anyone's validation in the room that I was doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then to work on my relationship with my own story.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty incredible to have you.
I was shaking in my boots.
Yeah.
And I got some criticism. My fear came true.
Oh, because you didn't do it right.
Well, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but that's such a small criticism in the big
it
scheme
was
of things.
but
You
it was
do
the
see-
one I didn't want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my fear said, "Hey, girl, I'm showing up today."
Yeah. Yeah.
And she sat in the front row.
Yeah.
And she gave, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was a tough thing to overcome.
It was incredible moment to look at because you shared your story with everybody in that room in a very public manner, and her story, we'll get to it probably on another podcast.
Definitely.
But it's at the heart of the biggest experience in her life to deal with, and it's to share that vulnerably out there with that many people is amazing.
Yeah, well, now that we've cracked that can wide open, we're doing a podcast about life.
We're gonna do the
Here
whole thing. Yeah.
So questions, Gary. You've alluded to what's going on. Is this a new thing to be dealing with anxiety in your home?
Yeah. Well, and so they know themselves as this powerful, accomplished, be able to get it done type of person, and that is one of the biggest struggles right now is to like, where did that person go? I want, like, this is like they literally feel like another version of themselves.
Yeah.
And they can't.
I bet they want that person back too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if they wrote her? Oh, there I go. We know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
We love you.
Yeah.
And thank you for letting us talk about it. I'm guessing that there's permission and trust here to do that. Or I am guessing this thing will never see the light of day.
Or we'll never ever talk about it again.
But do we write that? I mean, how would she feel about writing a love letter to the person that she misses that's inside there still?
That's interesting. Did somebody have you do that at some point?
No.
That's a pretty cool idea, though.
Well, actually, that's not true. I've done that,
but not for that reason.
In a different way.
Different context.
Yeah.
Huh.
But just like giving herself some grace by like, I know I've been gone for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I wonder how that would feel for her.
Yeah.
But I don't think you totally answered the question. Is this a brand new experience as it relates to circumstances, or is this something that has ebbed and flowed and there's awareness that it's been there?
Life event about a year ago has led to all of that. So I would say it's super new, and like that anxiety didn't exist or rear its head like this
in
before.
This way.
Yeah. Were there moments of anxiety for her that you might call stress anxiety, right? Like just more about the stress, maybe not even anxiety, maybe it's just stress.
Yeah.
This is just something clearly different, and
it's a
she
flare.
has an experience. Yeah. Yep.
Which makes a person feel wobbly when you're like, why why can't I handle this the way I always have?
Right.
Right? Like
Like
it's, and so
and
that's scary. Gary.
we're supposed to be
Scary Gary.
smarter, older, better, right?
Supposed to?
Yeah, right.
No.
Not doesn't, and that regression feels awful,
Yeah.
right? Like to feel like you're going backwards instead of forward has to have
But is it
such a
backwards,
big.
or are you just like digging into something deeper than you knew? So it's an opportunity. Like, here's another thing that I've learned for myself in a world where I attempt to follow some of my own advice is that, like, everybody says it's not, growth isn't linear, blah, 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 blah. What I found is, like, some of my favorite uh, gurus, if you will, talk about contrast is the opportunity to learn more, right? Contrast is what we do want, what we don't want,
Mm-hmm.
and we're given opportunities to go deeper and heal ourselves more, more thoroughly,
Yeah.
and understand ourselves more thoroughly when we're given a lens of something that creates a scenario we're not comfortable with, right? Like, and that it's not because it's not like, oh, see the gift in everything,
Yeah.
but it is about, it's not always good or bad.
Yeah.
Like, when I finally let go of this idea about, am I a good person, bad or did
Yeah.
I do right or wrong, or I try to control for, from a
Yeah.
financial standpoint, even, like, I don't want to go backwards because I'm always supposed to go
Yeah.
forwards,
Yeah.
or like, because I was worried, I only someone who hadn't learned their lessons would make the choices, or you know what I mean? And
Yep.
it's like, what the fuck? How are those ever serving
Yeah.
people? But also, like, at some point, like, do you know anyone with a life that doesn't have life events
Mm-hmm.
happen, that's interesting? Like, eventually life catches up with everybody,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know anyone who, like, it would be so boring. It would be so boring to, like, because certain people who never go through things, and we do have those people in our lives, right? Certain
Yep.
people who don't actually go through things are the most fragile fucking people I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Because they
it's
haven't.
like, oh my God, like I couldn't imagine if I cried
Yeah.
over a broken nail,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, but there are, like, it, but it's like, so thankfully we're given this opportunity to have experiences and experience contrast so that we can learn who we are, so that we can understand what we're made of, so that we can make changes where we need them. And I think, like, this is the perfect circumstance for her to find a different version of herself, because I also remember, like, a period of time when I was first getting to know both of you where there was the event
Mm-hmm.
that you're talking about, and then, and a very, like, sad version, a person who was dealing with sadness,
Yeah.
and from someone that was just such a ray of light
Yeah.
that I, like, naturally, right? And so you want to just be like, God, please just know your value.
Yeah.
Just know
Yeah.
your value. Just see that. Just see
Yeah.
what I see. And at the same time, when that person, like, kind of came to a different perspective through on the other side of this, within a matter, like, of weeks at that time,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, there you are.
Yeah.
Also, she was so proud of herself. And she even said it. She was like, I'm so proud of myself for this blah blah
Right.
thing
Right.
that,
Right.
and what I'm learning now about. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because what you're talking about is actually having to go through that and dealing with it head on, or dealing with it as head on as
Yeah.
as you can or can't, but just having that experience does and can transform
And she
you,
has
right?
those
Like has
tools.
that tools, right? When and there's no quit, right? Like that's the
No.
great thing, is that, like,
Well,
because you could, because
for
other
some
people quit.
people,
Yeah.
it is an option
Yeah.
that none of us here who are alive to as suicide
To right.
survivors, we
Yeah.
disagree with that
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there
Yeah.
is quit.
Yeah.
That is a choice.
Yeah.
People do choose every day to continue.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
let's honor
And
that.
that is a great thing. All right, what are we doing with this box?
Are we done
Now
talking
that
about it?
yep, we've unpacked it. We've talked about as much as we can talk about right now. So
Have we?
now what are we going to do about it? Yep.
What are we gonna do? Like, how do we so we've agreed, like, in the format, like, we don't just, like, leave shit out there on the table, right?
Nope.
What do we need to do to, are we gonna nurture this? Are we going to acknowledge, like, it's a thing?
So I think
What do you,
for
so you
yeah,
speak for yourself.
yeah, I think for me, and like what I would want to share with others, anybody going through it, but also with the people in my life that are dealing with this, because I certainly have them. Yeah, I have a number of them, right? And I think what's there for me is that continued first step of acknowledging that it's there, that it's happening for me, and being the space for them to be able to do that, and then just really holding that space of you can be exactly who you are, how you are, right here, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be that space for you. You can be that. That's for me. When I'm gonna, I think a younger version of myself would have been like, oh come on, toughen up. Oh come on, get over it.
Yeah.
Get grow up here, get over it.
Not
Doing
helpful.
something stupid, right? And I don't know that I ever would have said those things out loud, but I would have thought them. I don't have those thoughts now, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my thoughts now are much more like, okay, how can I support? How can I create the space? How can I help that? And I think that the more I'm going to assert that there's people out there that probably are on the other side of that, right? Like, come on, get over it, deal with it. Come on, have that sort of thing. And I think for them is to really take a look at that and go, are we actually being of service to the people that we love and care about in our lives when we're not being in that space or loving that space?
I also would have to admit, even as someone who encounters this and has gone through those seasons too of like trying to figure it out, and operating in it, I still was that person even with my daughter. Sometimes I'd be like, could we just not do this now? Like the timing is really bad.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can we not have a meltdown in this moment?
Right.
Like, can I just have a day?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that.
But that's human.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I don't always have the patience to meet someone where they're at. And I bet, like, thankfully I pay for a therapist knowing that she's got to have a place to talk about her mom,
Yeah.
But like, yeah, so what do I want to do with this? Well, first I want to acknowledge, like, when we were talking about what box we wanted to unpack before we hit record, you asked me what if anxiety was relevant to me. I want to acknowledge that for a hot minute I forgot just how relevant it was to me.
Yeah, because you totally were like, no, I think I used to have some in the past. I
doing
don't really
right.
do it, but I'm good now.
Oh God, it's really like, so I just want to acknowledge that this is really something that I feel I can say I've done some massive healing around, to the point that it does feel good to not see myself as this diagnosed label of an anxious person.
Yeah.
Like, or to be regularly needing, therapy treatment specifically focused on this thing. Because what I was doing has worked.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I don't give myself credit often, so I'm going to do it here.
It's a huge victory.
Yeah.
Like, it's a huge victory. And I love, I mean, that's the other thing to do with the box is just hopefully everybody gets that, like, there is a way.
There is a
You're
way.
not stuck.
But please don't also like don't just, my way worked for me because of the shoes I've walked in and the things I've dealt with. And I have to say, like, what really probably sealed the deal in terms of what is worry for? I've gone through some of the unimaginable experiences to the point where I can look at life and be like, I've seen the scariest things. I've been in the scary, my husband jumped off a bridge to end his life. I at that point felt that I lost everything. And couldn't have been more like, at some point you stop getting scared when the unimaginable,
because you've already been there. You've
been
to hell and back. Okay,
yeah,
right?
and not that fear is anxiety, but at that point it's like worry serves me no good.
Yeah.
And that had been a message in programming I've been working to rewire, but I have to say, like, that's probably where I left it in the rear view mirror for real, for real, for good. Because that, because I could get busy worrying about everything, or I can get busy feeling and living the life with immediacy that I know that I want, and that I feel honors the integrity of this man's life that I love so much.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, I wouldn't recommend that treatment
no,
for anyone.
No. Well, and I think that what you're pointing to too is that everybody's journey is going to be different, and there is no Xanax.
No.
immediate cure.
I have
for
learned to
everybody.
smoke a J once in a while, and that's pretty great.
That'll help too.
Well, fuck,
for some
like,
people, but
for
see,
6
but,
weeks
yep.
solid after he died, I think my house was a Cypress Hill concert, like when you walked in. But like, and actually, it's probably been almost a year since the last time I did. But at the end of the day, my point just being like, yeah, there's some medicinal relief to things,
right?
While you're working through your
everybody's journey is going to be different.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have different things, and that's the deal.
Yeah, I think the dog just farted.
Oh god!
I just want you to know.
It's probably a really good time to end this show.
Did the mic pick it up?
Yeah.
So that's a lovely box.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
All right,
that was a Gary special.
Let's put that box away.
Where are we putting it?
Well,
do we actually have a shelf? We need a shelf.
We don't. Yeah, we need a shelf, but we also don't need it to be closed and taped up. Like that box should remain open for plenty of space for people to.
I see what you did there.
Yep, be vulnerable in for everything to happen.
Okay, so we're just gonna kind of like that.
Sure.
We can just like peek it.
Yep, that's great. Yep.
Oh my god! And you answered the last question. What do we do? What do we do with this box?